to discuss NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor and Democratic strategist Juanita Tolliver. Sahil, the most conservative Supreme Court we have seen in nearly a century is going to rule on abortion and gun rights before next year's midterms. How could rulings from this court that don't match the views of most Americans, you saw that polling there, impact the political landscape?
Right. And Alicia, let me preface this by saying we don't exactly know what the Supreme Court is going to do here. It could take somewhat incremental steps in a conservative direction, or these could be big blockbuster rulings against abortion rights and in favor of gun rights. Given the conservative tilt of the Supreme Court, we can be pretty confident that the right is going to be happy about this. And if they are big rulings, this creates an opportunity for Democrats, because on the issue of Roe versus Wade, polling shows that as much as 70% of the U.S. public supports that decision and doesn't want abortion rights to be taken away. Now, guns used to be a winning issue for Republicans, but since about 2013, since the Newtown shooting of children in a classroom, about 20 of them in late 2012, public opinion has moved toward stricter gun laws. So this all creates an opportunity for Democrats to say, okay, they're probably going to lose at the Supreme Court, but they have an opportunity to galvanize voters, the majority of the country that happens to agree with them on these issues, and say, you may not be happy with what happened in court, but you should show up and vote for politicians who are going to try to counteract these rulings.
Well, Juanita, to that point, I want to bring in an article from the Washington Post editorial board about the court's decision to hear the Mississippi case. It reads, the court's conservative majority must choose. Will the justices unravel decades of precedent to achieve an ideological victory on the most hot button of issues, or will they preserve the credibility of their institution? Mississippi flagrantly transgressed the court's settled abortion jurisprudence in a scheme designed to produce precisely this Supreme Court showdown. In an instant, the court would burn a precious store of legitimacy if it upheld Mississippi's brazen breach of long-settled precedent. This comes as the GOP is making it harder to vote. They also have gerrymandering on their side. Juanita, how do Democrats successfully fight against systems that are designed to enable a Republican agenda?
Yeah, Alicia, I feel like there's fires on all fronts that are working against Democrats going into this midterm cycle, where we know people who are in control of Washington, the party in control, tends to not do well. But as Sahil mentioned, these potentially conservative rulings coming from the Supreme Court will absolutely be a motivating factor if they go the way that we think they will. I think there is a really easy story for Democrats to tell about how Trump and Republicans packed the court. And let's be real, with Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation happening just a week before the 2020 election, that through line is already there for Democrats to pull on and leverage in their messaging and framing. But I do think with the Supreme Court, Democrats also have to prepare themselves to be responsive to Democratic voters who are like, wait, you were in control, but you made no effort to expand the courts. What did you do to prevent this? What did you do to potentially change these outcomes? And saying we started a commission to study it, or our hands are tied, is going to be insufficient for voters. When I look at voting rights, we know that this is something that state houses across the country have been taking on, with Republicans essentially using a copy and paste approach to voter suppression tactics. And the issue here is twofold, because for the Republican Party, there could be some backlash from the reality that they're still using these lies and these unfounded claims of election fraud, which may turn off Republican voters who no longer trust or have confidence in elections. So Republicans have to tread carefully there. But I think Democrats absolutely have a steady drum to beat around all the ways Republicans are making us unsafe, or all the ways Republicans are dismantling these systems. And I think back to what you mentioned, Alicia, about the January 6th commission being another prime example of Republicans obstructing Americans from getting the truth. And so Democrats have a platter full of things to respond to. It's about how they're going to beat that drum and frame it in a way that is motivating and mobilizing and sustainable for the next 18 months.
And I would add to that, Juanita, something that has a long-term vision, right? Something that goes beyond 2022, which Sahil, President Biden formed a commission to study reforming the Supreme Court. You're reporting on what the latest is in that process. And if the court does, in fact, weaken Roe, do you then expect to see a push from progressives to expand the bench?
Right. The commission had its first meeting earlier this week, just a few days ago, and its mandate is to deliver a report 6 months from the first meeting, which takes us to about November. Now, the commission is made up of liberal and conservative voices. I do not expect it to put out a recommendation of saying just expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats. Progressive activists are pushing that that proposal. They believe it's already necessary to do. It's already arguably justified by the Republican tactics in 2016, blocking a Democrat from filling a vacancy in an election year and then allowing a Republican to fill a vacancy in 2020. So where it goes from here is unclear. But yes, Alicia, I do think those Democrats will probably have a little bit more traction, a little more oxygen to push that message, maybe convert a few lawmakers in Congress to that cause if something really transformative happens, such as overturning Roe versus Wade or expanding gun rights to the point where anyone can carry it outside the home and states can't stop it.
Juanita, before I let you go, I want to turn to the January 6th attack on the Capitol as Republicans push to move on, saying it is too early to deal with this. I want to take a listen to this sound from a new documentary. It's of a Trump supporter who was charged in the attack.
Something in the back of my head was saying, this is like my Rosa Parks type of moment. This might be breaking the law, but as long as I show my face, as long as I show that I'm, not wanting to be violent or not engaging in violence with police, then I'll be fine.
Let me put it bluntly, Felipe. Some people are going to be outraged that you compare yourself to Rosa Parks.
I think it's an appropriate comparison.
Juanita, he seriously compared himself to Rosa Parks, which is devastating, and I have no words. Your thoughts?
It shows that he does not understand the history of this country, what Rosa Parks experienced, the systems built to oppress her as well as Black people. And I can't give that any weight, Alicia, right? Like, he laughed because he knew it was asinine. He knew it would try to elicit a response from Black and brown communities because he knows he's wrong. And just like many of the insurrectionists on that day, he was shielded by his whiteness as he joined other people in that crowd of fighting with officers, beating officers, and breaking into the Capitol building and threatening the lives of every member there, every staffer there, every worker in that building. So I'm gonna just dismiss that as folly because he knows that that's a lie, and really not even give that any weight, because what the intention there is just to further the same lies that we've heard from Republicans, that this was a normal tourist visit, right, Alicia? Like, they clearly were there, and no one was killed on that day or after. No one was harmed. Like, these lies are just ridiculous, and so I refuse to give it further oxygen.
I love that. Sahil, Juanita, thank you both.